me just ask you about the economy. We have heard recently from Jamie Dimon in his annual letter at JP Morgan. He says a recession is much more likely now. Janet Yellen was just speaking, I think in the last 24 hours, although it's hard to track from here when things are happening, has just said in the last 24 hours, I think, that the U.S. is in better shape now than it was 6 months ago. Which of those camps would you put yourself in? Well,
I know what a lot of different businesses are doing, and I just got a report from one of them that happens to be in the retail-related business. And in any event, you know, it was minus 22% in February from a year ago. They didn't think that was going to happen.
Sales?
You mean profit? In sales, profits are down a lot more than that. On the other hand, some of our businesses are still doing fine, but they all are reporting that the new, you know, some of them are living off of orders were placed months earlier and that sort of thing. But it's a tougher world out there in a great many businesses, not in the insurance business. Insurance business should be better this year than last year. That doesn't mean it will be, because we can't predict everything that happens, but on a probability basis, it should be better than last year. And the railroad business is down, and carloads carried, but it isn't dramatic. And of course, we've got a utility business, and that doesn't really vary much with things. But overall, I think people that run our businesses that do have any sensitivity to the economy are surprised at where they are now compared to where they thought they were going to be 6 months ago. That doesn't mean the world is coming to an end or anything, because 58 years I've been running Berkshire. I mean, we've run into all kinds of problems, but that's what business is about. And we run our business so that we don't depend on everything being big hunky-dory always. We run it so that we will be the last man standing, and that's the way. If millions of people are going to give me their money and tell me to take care of it, we're going to try and take care of it. And if we don't make as much money as we might have if we'd leveraged more or done other policies, so be it. But you think a recession is more likely now than maybe you would have said 6 months ago? Well, I think most of our managers would say that they are surprised at where they are now compared to how they thought they were going to feel 6 months ago at this point. And in a lot of businesses, but not in the insurance business, you know. But I think the people at the railroad are somewhat surprised that car loadings aren't a little higher rather than a little lower, you know, somewhat lower. But most of the stuff we carry is essential, but it reflects what's happening. And of course, supply lines were so disrupted and everything a year or two ago that, you know, no economic figures are pure, but I'm just telling you my impression. I look at the numbers every day. I mean, I look at our Easter sales day by day at the candy store, and I can look at California versus Washington versus Oregon, and I get them the next day. I mean, so I love figures. You know, you say that it doesn't really do me that good to be such a figure nut, but I just like them when I see them. In terms of the potential for a credit crunch coming through what the banks are going through right now, there's been a lot of speculation about what that could mean to the economy. Is it going to mean a 0.5% hit to GDP? Is it going to mean a 1% hit to GDP? What would you guess? I would say that I've been in business running Berkshire for 58 years, and I've never found economic forecasts of any use to the company. And all we have to do is keep running every business as well as we can, and we got to keep plenty of cash on hand so that people can keep making intelligent decisions rather than those forced upon them. And that's all we know how to do. And if I depended in my life on economic forecasts, you know, I don't think we could make any money. I don't know how to do it. And you know, people want to get them, so they get them, but it has no utility. When I find one of our companies has hired somebody to tell them what's going to happen in the economy, I mean, they've thrown the money away as far as I'm concerned.
Looking at the global trends, it increasingly does seem that zero-emission vehicles may have finally reached the cusp of mass adoption. Do you see any opportunities in this space, either in specific vehicle manufacturers or in related technologies?
Well, I would say that Charlie and I for long have felt that the auto industry is just too tough. You know, the Ford Motor Company, I mean, Henry Ford looked like he owned the world with the Model T, and he brought down the price dramatically. He took up wages dramatically. He might have been, with a different personality or some different views, he might have been elected president of the United States. I mean, there's a good book that came out on that recently that told about the story of, it tells a little about Nebraska in terms of it, but Henry Ford and Thomas Edison joining up, but maybe a year or two ago. If you're interested in autos, you ought to read that book. But Henry Ford did that, and 20 years later, that they were losing money, and they had a guy with a gun in his pocket, I think Harry Bennett, that was running the Ford Motor Company. It was on its way to the junk heap when the whiz kids came in, and Henry Ford II, Hank the Deuce, as they called him, brought in Tex Thornton and my friend R.J. Miller and a few people. I was reading the other day, actually, the 1932 annual report of General Motors, and it's one of the best annual reports I've read. It's a totally honest, assessment of exactly where they were. They had 19,000 dealers then, and the population, as I mentioned earlier, was about 120 million or so. And now with 330 million people, all brands in the United States have like 18,000 dealers or something. It's just a business where you've got a lot of worldwide competitors. They're not going to go away, and it looks like there are winners at any given time, but it doesn't get you a permanent place. Although, as I mentioned, I would say Ferrari is in a special place, but they only sell 11 or 12,000 cars a year, and U.S. last year, I think there were 14 million something, and it's not a business where we find it fascinating to be in. We like our dealership operation, but I don't think I can tell you what the auto industry will look like 5 or 10 years from now. I do think that you're right that you will see a change in the vehicles, but you won't see anybody that owns the market because they changed the vehicle. Charlie?
Well, the electric vehicle is coming big time, and that's a very interesting development. At the moment, it's imposing huge capital costs and huge risks, and I don't like huge capital costs and huge risks.
And we're subsidizing it in the United States, and we're actually doing it, putting in a pro-labor time. I mean, it is subject to politics like you can't believe, too. But it's going to be with us. We're not going to quit driving cars, and the American public has a love affair with them. But I think I know where Apple's going to be in 5 or 10 years, and I don't know where the car companies are going to be in 5 or 10 years. And I may be wrong, but that's Charlie and I follow the auto business with intense interest. Charlie's firm was the specialist in General Motors on the Pacific Coast Stock Exchange, and that was a franchise, wasn't it, Charlie?
Yeah, by working very hard, we could make a minor amount of money.
Yeah.
We have had lots of investors in commercial real estate who have come in and said that this is going to be a crisis point, that the government is going to have to step in, that something should be done because there are so many commercial real estate loans that are coming due between now and 2025, and that they won't be able to get credit from the banks in the same way to renew or to, once those maturities come due, to refinance.
Well, let's say they lose $100 billion in the banking system. Most of the banks can take that loss, their share of that loss, and a few of them, because they did other things, their shareholders will end up losing the money, but the depositors won't lose money. But if you lend money to somebody and it comes due and they can't pay, the old story about the banker, I never made a bad loan. Of course, some of them turned bad after I made them. I mean, and that's exactly what happens in, whether it's in commercial real estate. And if money rates are 2%, or we were lending money out at 4 basis points at Berkshire to the federal government, not much more than a year ago, a year and a half ago, or something like that. And if those rates change, let the person who bet that they wouldn't change lose money. I mean, that's if you make mistakes in business, there's plenty of people make mistakes. You pay for them. If you've got a big profitable business on top of it, which a good many banks do, you take your losses and you keep going on. I mean, banks can take a lot of loan losses, but you can't take something that wipes out their capital and expect the world to ignore that fact.
Meaning that you don't think anything needs to be done on the commercial real estate front?
Well, I think that the people who lend too much money should take losses, and they're getting properties handed back to them now. I mean, within the last month or 6 weeks.
The banks are.
Yeah, I mean, they got some office buildings in Los Angeles, and Blackstone walked away from something. I mean, and if you get a non-recourse, everybody goes in the real estate business is told the first rule, the second rule, the third rule is never sign your name to anything. And so you have non-recourse mortgages, and they're going to walk away, and the bank's going to get stuck with losses, and maybe they'll hold the property a long time and it'll come back. And there's all kinds of ways that if you got capital strength, you may decide, well, I'll just hold it. But that money is sterile for quite a while, and that's part of banking. I mean, you expect to lose some money in banking. It's not a sure thing on every loan, and you build that into your calculations, and then you have capital that protects your depositors from it eating into their money. And if it does eat into their money, then the FDIC, which is in effect really a mutual insurance company of a very peculiar sort, essentially spreads the losses among the continuing banks by higher FDIC assessments in the future.